Welcome to the Beau Show, Faith in America. That is the topic of today's show, in which I speak to a number of artists whose influence is felt from coast to coast through their talent, their faith, and their strong belief in America as a leader and a beacon to the world. Of course, one of the most powerful artistic representations of how divinely inspired America is the song God Bless the U.S.A. by Lee Greenwood. I was able to speak to Lee about the song almost 40 years after it first came out. As a songwriter and as a singer myself, I wanted to revisit some of those iconic lyrics that he wrote back then to find out how true or differently they may ring today. Here's my conversation with Lee Greenwood. Well, I'm joined here by the iconic and legendary Lee Greenwood. Lee, thanks for being with me today.
You're welcome. Great to see you again.
I know. We go back a ways from Nashville, Tennessee, and your lovely wife, Kim, as well.
Thank you.
Lee, we all know the song, God Bless the U.S.A. Why did you originally write it?
You know, I get that question so many times. I lived in Nevada. I left home at 17 years old, raised in California, and I lived in Nevada for 20 years. While I was there were lots of things that came to my attention about national crisis. And you have to know that I worked along with Elvis Presley at the Hilton, where I was just at. It's now Westgate, and he had this trilogy he did with Battle Hymn of the Republic. I said, if I ever get my career as a country artist, and I really hadn't aimed at country yet. I was rhythm and blues and jazz and rock. You know, I hadn't made that transition. And I said, I want to do the trilogy as my closer. Mm-hmm. And I think when I started touring as an artist, that did pass my mind. I had 3 or 4 hit albums before I wrote God Bless the U.S.A. Yeah. It wasn't intended as an anthem. It was barely, I just want to write this for my country. Right. And it wasn't until Universal said, we want that song to be a record. You know what that means?
Yeah, of course.
That means they want radio to play it.
Right.
Nobody would ever heard it otherwise. So it became then suddenly an umbrella for my career, but not a parachute.
Well, I want to talk about some of the things that you mentioned in the song. And I don't know if anyone's gone over this with you, but I want to do it songwriter to songwriter. You mentioned some iconic places. From the lakes of Minnesota, where the George Floyd riots broke out, to the hills of Tennessee, our Tennessee, and the plains of Texas, states that are relatively free, of course. Detroit, not so great, right? Houston, okay. And then New York to L.A., perhaps some of the worst. You say there's pride in every American heart. Is that still true?
Yes, unequivocally, it is still true. Every American loves America because they know they can have anything they want here as long as they work for it. Don't infringe on another person's rights, but you can have. That's why people are dying to get here to this country. You know, you mentioned the lyrics of my song. Remember, I wrote this in 1983. Right. Okay. When we looked at the geography of the United States, New York and L.A. were the big population centers. There wasn't necessarily riots. Right. Detroit was also Motown, and Motown was responsible for a heavy economy in the United States, as was Houston because of the oil. Right. So those are the reasons I chose those cities, not because of a political reason or some agenda. And then, of course, you look at overall proud to be an American. Yeah, people are still proud of this country, I guarantee you.
Well, we're starting to see some musicians get tired and push back. You've been a long conservative voice, but people like Kid Rock, Brantley Gilbert, Jason Aldean, is there perhaps a conservative musical awakening, do you feel?
I think there's an awakening in the culture. There's a cancel the culture kind of attitude, but I think that's changing, and it's changing because of the respect for the military, if nothing else. We need to have the right people run for office, and it's very difficult because they know they get just crucified when they try to do something good, find something in their past. They said something, but people change, and people also are really concerned about America's future. I am concerned about the direction we have taken. We need to take America back as a conservative.
Well, we know that God Bless the USA, Donald Trump uses it to walk out.
Absolutely.
You've sung it for a lot of Republicans. I'm curious, have you ever performed it for a Democrat, or has a Democrat asked you to perform it?
Actually, yes. And as a matter of fact, I'll go even deeper than that.
Okay.
At the Ronald Reagan Library opening, right after he got out of office, I sang for 5 presidents. It was Nixon, Carter, Ford, Bush and Reagan, and all their wives, and Lady Bird Johnson, by the way, who was on the dais at that time. So you have 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans. Second time was at Texas A&M for hurricane relief just a few years ago. And in the audience in the front row was Presidents Obama, Clinton, Carter, both Bush presidents. So yes. And I worked through 4 different administrations as a member of the NEA Council. I've just now since been let go, but all the council members have aged out. And so that was a privilege as well, serving under different administrations.
Well, let's talk about patriotism in general, because obviously you're a patriot. At what point did becoming patriotic a Republican thing and being apathetic or anti-America a Democrat thing?
I don't know, maybe war had something to do with it. You know, I know every time we have a crisis, it becomes more conservative because you start protecting those who are wounded. And that's something that we do. And we build homes for wounded warriors, and we have for 10 years, 200 homes. And we're getting a little help now from John A. Morris and Bass Pro as we begin to build more than that. And so that's kind of the focus of what I do now, take care of the military.
Well, it's tough because, you know, a lot of Americans out there right now are very disappointed. They're depressed, especially after seeing what happened in Afghanistan and now seeing what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, maybe a failure of leadership. As a songwriter, how does that make you feel?
The first inclination is kind of what Alan Jackson did right after the attack on America, write something about the event.
Right.
There's many writers that have done that. I think I've already got the song, God Bless the U.S.A., and I'm not going to write another one about the events of today. We do pray for the people in the Ukraine. We are taking the right stance here with the rest of the world. Russian aggression just cannot go unnoticed.
Well, Lee Greenwood, thank you so much, and congratulations on being in the Hall of Fame for CPAC.
And I'd like to mention my Bible, GodBlessTheUSABible.com. If you want to pick up a leather-bound copy of the King James Version Bible, in the back of it is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Declaration of Independence. Easy to read.
Boy, you got it all covered there in that one book. Thanks so much, Lee. Appreciate your time. I also spoke with singer-songwriter Danny Griego. Danny has also used his voice for causes greater than himself, especially the song 22, which refers to the number of veterans that commit suicide on a daily basis. Danny also opened up about whom he feels he works for in an industry where most artists have sold out or are puppets wielded by record label masters. I hope you enjoy my chat with Danny Griego. Well, we're here at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention 2022 in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm joined here by Danny Griego, a recording artist. Good to see you, Danny. Hold your mic
Thank
up
you,
for
Beau.
me.
Thanks for having me.
You're a recording artist. You know that. You got to hold that mic up. Well, Danny, you know, you've been introduced to me by a mutual friend who is a veteran, a Marine Corps gentleman named Bill Chatfield. And of course, in learning about you, I understand that you're not a veteran, nor am I, although we both share a similar mission, which is a passion for honoring our veterans. Tell me about a little bit about your background and how you wound up in this career and what led you to some of the mission that you have now.
Well, we can do what we do because they're guarding our wall, so we're indebted to them. My dad, of course, was a veteran, and I've done a lot of shows for veterans and do those around the country, all over the place. And one of the things that I did was out there called Operation Surf in California, where they teach amputees how to surf. And that was a very moving experience for me. And when I got done, I got a call from a gentleman who asked me if I could write on a song called 22. You know, well, he asked me if I could write on the 22 veterans a day committing suicide.
So that's the reason for it. That's the reason for 22. And 22 veterans are committing suicide every day. That's the statistic.
I think it's more like 50.
Okay.
You know, since Afghanistan, that number's jumped way up, and that doesn't include attempted suicides, of course.
Right.
And the number's extremely high.
And what year was this that this happened?
It was probably about 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
And so I partnered up with another artist named KP Fitz, and we wrote this song 22 and shot a video down in the Mississippi Delta at the crossroads on Muddy Waters property, where, of course, if you're going to do something like that, you're at a crossroads in your life.
That's right.
And I was insistent on using all veterans in the video, and we did that. And there's a scene in the video where they find the gentleman in his truck, you know, at the crossroads, and the police officer does a drive-by, and then he comes by later and finds what he finds. And there's an alternate ending where his buddies show up, and we get out of the truck and scoop him up, and we end up all having dinner at the cafe together, and it has a happy ending. So
it's a life that's saved, actually.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it still focuses on the harrowing statistic that 22 veterans are committing suicide per day, which I bet a lot of people don't know. And so what
it's
you're
staggering
doing,
just to think about it.
Of course it is. Of course, and like you said, not to even mention the attempts at it. We saw a horrible withdrawal in Afghanistan that caused a lot of veterans to have negative feelings about their efforts there. Yeah. And I recently saw former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo say to those veterans, your work, your effort was good, it was noble, it was not in vain.
Well spoken.
But I like the fact that in your piece, in your song, and in your video, that there is a life that is saved. Because suicide is a big deal right now. It was a big deal in the pandemic already. We know that. But what you've done is decided to, similar to what I did with my song Blessed, you've decided to take a major issue and call attention to what is a national tragedy, right?
I feel like it's kind of swept under the rug and we don't talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it, and we need to talk about it. Everybody needs to talk about it. It's a real epidemic, and I think we're largely ignoring it. I just think we need to address it and be talking about it publicly. And so I'm doing everything I can to get the word out, and hopefully y'all will spread that video around. 22, Danny Griego, KP Fitz, and just let veterans know that you love them, that you care. And if you're a veteran, reach out to your brothers in arms and your comrades, and they need to hear from you.
Yeah, that's something I think that's so important in a time like this, is that we get very selfish and get focused on ourselves when there may be someone next door in their truck. Could be the split-second difference between them preserving their life or taking it. And we don't realize the power, I think, individually that we have to change things. And with your song, you're raising awareness for that, hopefully inspiring others to say, you know what, if there's one life that I can save today, it's worth it, is it not?
Absolutely. All it takes is one word, just like a word from Jesus.
How you feel music is able to be the conduit between the divine and what you want to say or sing.
I'm a songwriter, and a lot of times when I write, the song just shows up if you can get out of your way. And I've written a number of songs that were written as fast as you could write them down, and it's like, I call it God's radio, because there's a switch that gets flipped, and if you're out of your way enough, then you can get it, as much of it as you can get, and that's straight from the press, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course.
So.
Well, Danny, as we close out here, we'll clip in to show how to see your video. We'll show portions of it, but how can people find it? Where's the best place for them to go see 22?
I guess you just do a search online and put in Danny Griego, Griego, and 22. You can spell out 22 or just put 22, and it should pop right up.
So go look for Danny's music, Danny Griego, search for 22. And Danny, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you, Beau. Appreciate
it. God bless you.
Lastly, I was able to speak with Lucas Miles, a pastor, an author, and a filmmaker at the National Religious Broadcasters Conference. We talked about how he counsels actors in Hollywood who have to traverse a very difficult path between their craft and their own faith. I found that when I lived in Hollywood, this can be a very tricky journey. And Lucas has a way of being able to see things from that perspective and provide balance, which can be a tough thing when navigating the entertainment industry. Here's Lucas Miles.
I'm here in Nashville at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention 2022, and I'm joined by Lucas Miles. Thank you so much for joining me,
Thanks
Lucas.
for having me on.
Lucas, you're a pastor, an author, a podcast host, and you seem to have a great 30,000-foot view of our culture, especially from a faith-based perspective. What is your outlook on American culture as we know it right now?
Look, I'm cautiously optimistic. As I travel around the country, I am seeing so much movement just among church leaders, among even lay people within churches and conservative groups who are just really excited about seeing this nation return to sort of a Judeo-Christian framework and really reestablish themselves, I think, on godly principles. The concern, though, is there's obviously still a very strong movement towards progressivism, critical theory, etc.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching that closely, speaking out of it against it as much as I can, but also really trying to build what I believe is a strong base with of support for just kingdom ideas.
Well, you also have a deep background in Hollywood. I really want to get to the root of that because you've produced films and you've offered pastoral support to actors who are coming up. Have you seen a gradual erosion of values over time?
It's interesting. One of the things I love about Hollywood, and I'll give you the positive first, is that Hollywood, because Christianity historically has not always been given a very strong place in Hollywood. When you meet Christians in Hollywood, it doesn't matter their denomination, it doesn't matter, kind of what church they go to. You're a Christian, you're a believer, and so there's a real unity I see within Christians in Hollywood because it's rare that they come across somebody else like themselves. So that produces some really sweet relationships there. Now, certainly, we see that historically, I think Hollywood has seemed hostile towards Christian values. In actuality, Hollywood is really about making a buck. It's about, building the pocketbooks of the decision makers that are there. And so what we as conservatives, as Christians, need to show is that box office projects, streaming projects, film platforms, entertainment platforms can draw the crowds. And really, when we show, so many Christian movies, we have Christians saying, make a Christian film, make a Christian film. There's not enough Christian entertainment. That when somebody makes one, those Christians don't show up to the box office to support it. And so I really always urge Christians, look, I don't care if it's a B movie. Show up and support it, because when you do that, it creates the opportunity for more successful faith projects in the future.
Show them the money. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I remember when I lived in LA, I tried to find a church to go to as quickly as possible because I felt the need just to stay grounded.
Yeah.
But I saw a lot of people lose themselves. Did you notice that too?
I've done a lot of coaching for artists and entertainers, and certainly been in, my days on walking around Hollywood myself. And one thing that I always tell people is, as you're developing your craft, also develop your heart. And so it's so easy to focus on, my acting ability, my singing ability, my dancing ability, and forget to develop character, forget to develop integrity in the process. And so, every time I'm talking to a young entertainer, that's one of the first things I'll tell them is like, okay, I don't care about all the stuff that you're doing. You're gonna keep getting better at that. But what doesn't happen automatically is really developing a strong relationship with the Lord and developing, your heart in the process, so that when you do reach success, you're actually able to sustain it. So many artists, so many actors we've seen, they shave their heads, they go crazy, they end up in rehab, drug use, everything else. That happens because they're developing their skills, they're moving their career forward, but they're not developing really who they are in the process.
My last question for you, Lucas, and it's just kind of a breaking thing that happened. I think it was yesterday, regards Jussie Smollett. He's been sentenced to 150 days in jail for lying about a fake hate crime. Jussie stands at the nexus, in my opinion, of so many things going on right now, culturally, spiritually, racially. How do you assess that? And I know he's someone everyone should forgive. That's the Christian in us. But how do we assess such a gross dereliction of what happened?
Yeah. Look, I think that, I read the judge's words to Jussie, and I mean, they were harsh.
Yeah.
And I could look at, there's part of me that sees the punishment and goes, 150 days of jail, man, I almost think he should have gotten longer than that, right?
Right.
And I'm probably good that I wasn't the
small.
one making the decision. But I think that what it did do is it set a precedent. And it set a precedent that this is unacceptable, and that, there is a such thing as racism that exists in this country. That is real. But the fabrication of racism to try to gain attention, that's evil. It is something that should be, condemned by every single person, regardless of their color, And I think that, it's really good that this came to light. It's important. I wish it wouldn't have been used and politicized the way in which it was for so long, especially before we knew the full details of it.
Yeah.
And this is why we need good journalism today. It's why we need to, wait before we jump to conclusions about situations. The Bible says the first one to tell their account seems right until the second one speaks. And I think this is a situation where exactly that happened.
Well, Lucas Miles, thank you so much for all you do. Congratulations on all you're doing and spreading the good word and your optimism, too.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so
Thanks
much,
for having me
Lucas.
on.
Appreciate it.
Finally, I wanted to let you all know that I will be performing at the American Freedom Tour this Saturday, March 19th at Florida Live Arena in Sunrise, Florida, where President Trump will be speaking along with Donald Trump Jr., Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Dan Bongino, and Candace Owens. If you happen to be coming, I hope to see you there. Or go grab your tickets now at AmericanFreedomTour.com. I'm Beau, and that's the show.